right, so we are getting into day 2 of our notes on informative communication. Yesterday, we talked about the 4 different types of informative communication. As a reminder, we have the definition speech. The definition defines a concept, a philosophy, or a topic to an audience that people don't, that the audience probably doesn't know about. Think like a TED Talk. Think like most speeches in general. I showed you guys a clip from Community yesterday that really kind of got that explained. We also talked about a demonstrative speech, shows you how to do something. We're going to actually look at that today as a class. We're also going to look at what an explanatory speech is, which is a speech that explains the state of something. So a very specific topic, and it just gets into how that is going. Think like I know that a lot of you guys aren't finance people, but like shareholder meetings. So like Disney will have a meeting with all of their executives. And they're like, all right, guys, this is how we did in 2020 in terms of our finances. And they'll be like, yes, very good. More Marvel movies. And then they go and do that, obviously. But that's what an explanatory speech is. And then the last one was a descriptive speech, in which you paint a picture with your words for your audience to give them a better idea of a person, an event, a place, or just any noun, really. But today we're going to get into the most important part of a speech, which is how you begin it. So we haven't even really talked about speech introductions like all year. So today's a pretty good idea to kind of get into that. We know that when you guys write essays, you want to have a good hook, right? You want to be able to pull your reader in. But in the case of this, speeches are the exact same way. Now, writing a speech and writing an essay aren't the same, aren't perfectly the same, but there's a lot of things that can kind of transfer over. So we're not learning like new information, if that makes sense, just kind of like new-ish information. In the case of this, your introduction should have an attention getter. It can be anything, just something to kind of get your reader's attention. Now, we know, or your listeners in this case, because no one's reading, we're going to be actually listening to you. So when you identify with your audience, you want to let them know, hey, I get what you're saying and I know where you're coming from. So that's why I want to get your attention, because I think the speech is going to be important for you. And so if you're able to kind of identify with your audience, they're going to listen to you more, or at the very least, they're going to pay more attention for a longer time. I know that there are some classes where, based on how the Zoom goes, based on how the students are in the Zoom and how the teachers in the Zoom, you guys probably don't pay as much attention in certain classes and other ones. There might be people in this class that aren't paying a lot of attention, but that's okay. I'm going to continue to teach anyway, because I'm not teaching for any one student. I'm teaching for all of you. In the case of this, when you do have your attention getter, you want to identify with your audience, and you also want to reference the situation that brought everyone here to speak. So what I'm referring to by that is why you're all here. Obviously, we're here because we're here to learn, and we are in class. But in the case of this, if you're planning an informative speech, you do want to let them know why they're showing up in the first place. You can start with a personal story, also known as an anecdote. The problem with this, though, is that you don't want the story to be too long, because as a very long-winded person, as someone that talks a lot, I know that using a personal story can be dangerous, only because if you get so wrapped up in the story, you might forget what you were talking about, and your audience might become disinterested throughout time. So that's something to consider as well. Next, we have a rhetorical question. Yesterday's example, when Jeff gave his speech in the first episode of Community, he starts off with a rhetorical question. He said, do you know what makes humans different from other species? So that was a rhetorical question, a way to answer a question that you don't necessarily need answered, but it's a way to kind of get your audience immediately thinking. I know that a lot of English teachers don't want you to start your essays off with a question. I was actually one of those English teachers as well, because it's kind of lazy. But in the case of a speech, it isn't that bad of a deal, especially depending on how you pose the question and what the question is. And then, of course, you can use a quote. You started an essay off with a quote before. Martin Luther King said, blah, 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 blah. Or President Roosevelt said, and then whatever quote you want to use. And I think that people think that the importance or the recognizability, that's recognition, there we go. The recognition of the people that are saying the quote is what makes it so powerful, but that really isn't it. You can use a good quote from Dr. King, but if you don't connect it to what you're talking about, it kind of just falls flat. So if you use a quotation or a rhetorical question, just make sure that it is something that you can relate to what you are going to be explaining. Otherwise, it's going to come across as you don't really know what you're talking about. Now, 3 other crucial parts of the introduction is the statement of purpose. Think about this as kind of like your thesis. You're telling the audience why you are there to emphasize the importance of the main topic of your speech. Okay, so if you are all there at like a school assembly, they're going to say, "All right, guys, we're here to tell you about school safety. Or we're here to tell you about bullying, or we're here to tell you about how to order your cap and gown, or anything like that." So you have your statement of purpose. You are letting your audience know why you're there to talk to them. Perfect. Just go in. All right. So statement of purpose is one thing that you do want to include in your speeches. Okay. Then from there, we also have the relevance of topic to the audience. So you want to let your audience know why it's important that they're there and why they're going to be able to use this information. Hey, don't click off the video, because if you don't, you won't figure out how to make $100,000 just by sitting at home every year. A lot of people will use things like that. You want to let your audience know that whatever you're telling them is going to be relevant and will have utility with them. We kind of talked about that with our selective perception in the last unit, but we pay attention to things that are useful to us. And so in the case of this, you want to let your audience know why what you are saying is useful to them. And then, of course, we have a preview of the body of the speech. This one I like to think of as optional. You don't necessarily have to tell your audience exactly what your whole speech is going to be about, but I think that might be the English teacher in me saying, like, to avoid announcing. So, and when I say announcing, like, if you ever wrote an essay and you said, "I'm going to tell you a story about a time where it was hard for me to listen and how I learned an important lesson." When you write that in your English class, your teacher might get mad, because that's what's called announcing, and you don't necessarily want to announce in your essay, because we already know you're going to tell a story because you're telling a story. It's an essay. But in the case of a speech, it is okay to let them know what you're going to talk about, and it's also important to let them know how you're going to break your speech down. So that is how an introduction is broken down. We have the preview, the body of the speech being kind of optional. The relevance of the topic to the audience, though, definitely not optional. The statement of purpose is very important as well. And of course, it got its own slide. You want to make sure you also have an attention getter. So that's it for the notes, but I do want to show you guys an example of a demonstrative speech. So I'm going to show you guys this YouTube channel. You might be aware of it. He's pretty popular. His name is Binging with Babish. He makes cooking videos, but he makes cooking videos of recipes from television shows and movies. And easily his most viewed video of all time is him making the Krabby Patty from what is arguably the most popular cartoon of I think ever, SpongeBob SquarePants. And so what he normally does in the videos is he will show you how to make it as it appears in the show, and then he'll make like a super version of it, if that makes sense. So he's a self-taught chef, and apparently, according to a student in my second period, he used to work in the commercial industry. But he kind of just started with like a little setup in his kitchen, and this is his like first video where he's like, "All right, this is my full-time job now," and so he shows you how to make a Krabby Patty. So notice how you'll see in his speech he has an attention getter. He's also going to have a statement of purpose, and he'll also have a relevance of the topic. Okay, so let's take a moment to watch the first 2 minutes of this speech.
Don't you get it, you crustaceous cheapskate? I can't make a double Krabby Patty with the word. I can't put a patty on a bun with lettuce, cheese, onions, tomatoes, ketchup, mustard, pickles, and top bun together in that order.
It's time. It is time. As a thank you to everyone who helped make Binging with Babish my full-time job, it's time to finally make the all-time most requested dish on this show, the Krabby Patty. The ingredients of which are laid here before you, except, of course, the secret ingredient. What is the secret ingredient? Well, I just happen to have some right here. That's right, I've finally cracked the code. After a year of research, I've come to the conclusion that the secret ingredient is a heaping tablespoon of nothing. That might seem anticlimactic, but it actually makes a lot of sense. Mr. Krabs is a shrewd businessman, and it makes sense that rather than buying expensive secret ingredients, he would create a burger that is its own guerrilla marketing campaign. That being said, several sources cite the secret ingredient as being a pinch of King Neptune's Poseidon powder, which I think is monosodium glutamate, or MSG. So we're going to start by seasoning a store-bought frozen beef patty with salt, pepper, and MSG. Now, some people are saying that it's a crab burger, but Mr. Krabs is a crab. That's pretty horrible and barbaric, even for Nickelodeon. So, once thought, we're going to prepare our burger much as we would any other burger. Vegetable oil, high heat, cast iron. Then we're going to follow SpongeBob's exact order of assembly, which starts with lettuce on top of the burger, which is a terrible idea. Never do this, and I'm doing this for science. Then we're going to single slice of yellow American, single slice of Vidalia onion tomato, ketchup, mustard, and the absolute most important part, do not forget the pickles. You don't want bubble bass doing that god-awful laugh of his. Top bun, and there you have it, a Krabby Patty with the works. Even kind of looks like that one in the training video, right? Normal fast food burger protocol would be to just dig in, but I haven't been able to do a cross-section on this show in a while. That's a big relief for me. Now, as expected, this was a totally delicious burger. MSG makes things taste better, and while it's perfectly safe, I understand if people have reservations about eating it. Now, if you want to up the natural umami content of your burger, here's a few ways to do it.
All right. So, kind of going back to our notes and looking and seeing what makes a successful informative speech have a good introduction, we had an attention getter identifying with the audience. So in this case, he used a quote, literally like the clip from the show, in which they explain the recipe. And if you go back and look at any of his videos, they kind of do mention usually what the recipe is, and he has to kind of do a little bit of research to figure out how to make it. But great attention getter. Statement of purpose, he's making a Krabby Patty, relevant to topic to the audience. People love SpongeBob. That was his most requested video, so obviously he's going to make that. And he even previewed the body of the speech. He talked about how he was going to make it, walk you through each of the steps. He even talked about the secret ingredient a little bit. And then he, later on in the video, he makes like a better version of the burger. We don't have to watch the whole thing, but it ends up looking like this. He uses like homemade ketchup. I think he toasts the buns, and there's like a cheese crisp instead of like a piece of like American cheese. But either way, it's interesting to see how demonstrative speeches work. So I was going to use a clip from Avatar: The Last Airbender as an explanatory speech, but when I recorded it last period, I got copyright blocked by Nickelodeon. So I'm not going to show you the speech, but what I will do is kind of explain what is happening in it. But this is the scene in season 3 where Prince Zuko, who is for a long time in the show, the primary like bad guy or antagonist, is talking to his father about the truth. So it's kind of like a state of what he has learned. So he's talking about his life. So instead of it being like a definition speech in which he's talking about a bunch of different things or like one like central topic, he's talking about himself and the state of himself and what he has learned. And as he explains that, his father starts arguing with him, but it kind of essentially boils down to a really, really good explanatory speech. I'll post the link to the video in Schoology, just so that way you guys can look at it, because it's a really good example of an explanatory speech. But in the case of this, I can't put it in this video because I know that it will get taken down, so I don't want that to happen. So you'll just have to take my word for it, and that'll be it for our notes for today.